What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to Pro v Pro, a very, very special weekend for myself. Not from the WM Phoenix Open, although it was a good week. We'll talk about the Phoenix Open, but my Eagles get the Super Bowl. That was a lot of fun, Justin.
It was fun to watch. Honestly, not being a fan of either team, I was disappointed in the game. It was pretty much game. So I honestly, looking back as a football fan, I thought that if KC came out the second half, drove down the field and scored, we might have a game.
Mm-hmm.
You had to feel pretty good. As soon as they stopped them and then went down and scored, you had to be like, all right, that's
the Devontae Smith bomb touchdown. Like, that was the kill shot. That was the moment I knew that not even Mahomes can do this one. But yeah, I thought so. I mean, it's so interesting because, as an Eagles fan, obviously I loved every single second of that. But I do understand the sentiment that, you want to see a close, dramatic finish to a Super Bowl. On the other hand, I do think the fact that this team that we all kind of thought was invincible in Kansas City got blown out in the Super Bowl, completely dominated to the extent they did. I do think that too is an interesting outcome.
Yeah, this is the problem. This is a narrative that Philly has to live with right now that everybody's talking about. Is nobody wants to talk about they didn't rush, and they had pressure on Mahomes the whole time, and everybody's like, "Oh, Mahomes had his worst game of his career." Well, let's give Philadelphia the credit for what they did instead of saying, "Oh, he just didn't play good. If he plays good, it's better." The defensive line for Philadelphia absolutely dominated that game. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing to dominate Mahomes, but they dominated Mahomes and Andy Reid, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool to see. I kind of talked all week about how unpredictable these coordinators were, and of course Andy Reid as well. Vic Fangio was not unpredictable in this game. He just said our approach is going to be too good for them to beat, and he turned out to be right. So that was awesome. But we do have way too much to get to talk.
I got one more. Hey, before we move on, I have one more question. So, Philadelphia fans in general, from our side of the world, have this mantra of doing stuff that acting out and being certain types of fans, right? And so, when as a friend, I feel like you are a true Philadelphia fan, but you also don't do stupid stuff, right? Is it disappointing to see them pulling down posts and stuff in the street? Or are you like, hey, I get it, our fans are going to be our fans, and that's kind of, we're doing it because that's kind of where we stand in life? Do you have any general feeling on any of that?
No, I think number one, it's so dumb to single out one fan base for doing this. It happens in every single city when you have these celebrations. To me, it's just part of it, right? People are going to get carried away when they're celebrating, when they're really happy. That's true no matter where you're at. You're at a college party, you're going to see someone get carried away having too much of a good time. It's just
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Everybody's like, "Oh, look, Philly doing Philly things, blah blah blah." It's, in my opinion, it's stupid, but I just didn't know where you stood, and I think that's very fair. People tear down goalposts and burn down the street in every town.
Put it this way, I'm going to be there on Friday for the parade, and I can't promise you I won't be climbing any light posts. So let's just leave it. On a sadder note, I do think it's worth bringing up the fact that Tiger Woods' mom has passed away. Clotilda Woods, 78. I wanted to bring this up because there's an absolutely fantastic quote. Shout out to Akasal, one of our subscribers, for putting this in the Discord chat. It's an excerpt from one of Tiger's biographies. Clotilda always kind of struck me as this incredibly gentle woman. And so when I read this quote, I was blown away, and I just think it's the coolest thing ever. So while driving him to one of his tournaments when he was younger, she shared this philosophy with him. Quote, "In sport, you have to go for the throat, because if all friendly, they come back and beat your ass. So you kill them, take their heart." That is freaking awesome.
Yeah, so we were always taught, step on their throat. If you get a chance, step on your throat. That's just the way. I think that's what makes a career difference from maybe a Tiger Woods and somebody else that we can maybe, I don't even know who. I mean, obviously we don't know that, but like somebody that maybe was similar in talent, maybe David Duval, like somebody that like that was like at the time similar in the same talent. He didn't have the killer, we call it, just the killer instinct. So like, I think that he knew, I think that's what made Tiger the best, right? Is when he got a chance to take a kill shot, he took it.
And I think we all understand the influence that his father had on him competitively, but I think it's really cool to know that she was just as much a part of it as well. And I like just to use this to then talk about golf in general. Like I do think this mindset, it's so important, not just because you have to have that like killer instinct, but it's also about being positively motivated and going after something, keeping your foot on the gas. Like go back to the Super Bowl when it was 27-0. The Eagles kept their foot on the gas and they threw that bomb touchdown to Devontae Smith, just giving them absolutely no hope to come back. And the same kind of concept applies to golf. It's not just about kind of shutting the door on your competition. It's also making sure you are continuously in the mindset of attacking and going after something instead of being afraid of the bad outcome. Something that like, I know I spent years and years trying to kind of cultivate that mindset on the golf course.
Which is crazy because for some reason, I was always good at that, playing money games and playing in match play with people. And I always struggled with that very much in the tournament situation, right? It was for me, like I was just a different player in two different spots.
You know what it was for me? I grew up playing soccer, basketball, baseball. Those were my three main sports. That's what I played in high school. I just played golf in the summer up until college. But I found that like when I got into a pressure situation in golf, I was so used to in the heat of competition being able to use adrenaline and let that fuel me and let that make me a better player in key moments. But in golf, you have to kind of suppress that. And I had a really difficult time trying to suppress the adrenaline and calm myself while also staying in that like really aggressive mentality. So yeah, it's a really kind of interesting discussion. We could actually spend probably like 3 hours just talking about the mental,
especially for us, for two totally different ways of doing things and backgrounds. And maybe at some point we'll do that, like just not a show, but we'll just go through the mental of like the grind and the difference in lives and
around US Open qualifying time. That might be an interesting thing. We could just do like a one-off episode where we just talk about like how to prep for that stuff. So as you guys are watching, if you want to see an episode like that, if you want to hear us talk about US Open qualifying, anything of that nature, let us know in the comments. Let us know in DMs, whatever. I would very much appreciate that. But I think the last thing I'll say there is it's just such an incredible testament to what Tiger has been able to do, what Scotty has been able to do. Gives a window into like why Rory has had so much trouble getting that Masters victory and things. Just like, man, this game is so freaking difficult. Shout out to Thomas Dietrich for finally getting it done in the final round. We know what a challenge it's been for him specifically. So very cool to see him play well. I know you seem a little busy for the moment, Justin, but
no, I was just playing on my computer. You're good. I thought it was playing the link, the in between the two came unplugged, so we're good.
In terms of Dietrich, I think like one of the coolest things there is we spent so much time over the last couple of years just talking about how there's like this concept of we don't know who can't get it done, but we do know which guys can get it done. And I think anybody who would have thought, no, we do know the guys that can't get it done. Thomas Dietrich is probably the first name that they would have gone to. He goes out and just plays an absolutely stellar round of golf. And really, he was dealing with that type of pressure for 3 consecutive days and was just stones for 3 consecutive days. So that was very cool to see from Dietrich.
Dude, he's an elite talent. And if this is the beginning of him figuring out how to channel. So we talk about all the time people that hit shots that other people can't hit no matter what. Dietrich is in that conversation that can hit the high towering 220-yard 5-iron that stops on concrete, right? He's in that. And what he just did, beyond impressive, in my opinion. Like, it's to play with a lead from that far ahead and then go shoot 65 or whatever in the final round. like that's special in my opinion, because that's really hard. And to be honest, it kind of like, if we look back on it, like Super Bowl Sunday generally is a great day, right? You get a final round, waste management, and then straight into the Super Bowl, and instead we got 2 blowouts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really like they were both. He was, what hole was it to the back left pin? He hit that. I mean, drove it perfect. 11, whatever hole's supposed to be the hardest hole on the golf course.
11, yeah, and then
right
and then
down the
also
middle.
the shot on 16, the par 3.
Yeah, but the one on 11, like hardest one on the golf course, bombs it right down the middle, hardest fairway to hit, back left flag, and even the announcers are like, "Oh, he'll just hit it in the middle of the green." He almost hoops it, and it's like 8 feet behind the hole, and he just pours it in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, just so impressive.
I want to give some context to this performance from Dietrich. Over 5 true strokes gained for the week per round. This is some cool context. In Scotty's wins last year, he won the Tour Championship, the Olympic gold medal, the Travelers, the Memorial, the Heritage, and the Players, and the API, all gaining fewer than 5 strokes per round. Just an absolutely dominant performance from Dietrich. So when you look at the fact that he had that separation, it's not because other guys didn't step up. It's because he truly was just that damn good. So again, kudos to Dietrich.
I think I sent you a text about, I'm sure I'm going to be a week late on Spieth, as I called Spieth the week before, and then and he really played good too. Like I never feel like, or I didn't feel like watching that Spieth. Yes, he hit some bad shots, but usually when he hit bad shots, he hit a couple of amazing shots on 11 for one, where he drove it up against the cactus and then made par. Mm-hmm. He just got beat.
Yeah. I think it's kind of a good segue to what we got wrong last week, which honestly, I don't think we got a whole lot wrong. Like the closest that I have is Ben On, was very, very much on Benny On. And obviously he had just a disastrous putting week, but the driving wasn't where I wanted it to be. He kind of reverted to where he was last season with his driving accuracy instead of where he had kind of started the season. And then the putting just like kept him from doing anything from there. But that just kept me from getting a takedown, because it was a very strong 6 for 6. I needed either McIntyre or Taylor Moore to get a little bit closer to lead and maybe finish second, third instead of, I think it was like 4th and 5th, something like that. But really solid week all around, I thought.
I would think I was pretty wrong on Horschel. I was pretty high on Horschel, and he didn't play very well. I think I was pretty wrong there, because I know he didn't miss the cut by a ton, but he was just kind of was out of sorts and didn't play as well. And then the other one would probably be the Matsuyama stuff. I thought Matsuyama would play better. Even that, like, yes, I was wrong, but it wasn't like I wasn't outrageous. I mean, Minwoo Lee, that we were both huge on, like found his way around the lead and obviously didn't close, but he played good.
Yeah, we were definitely right about that. I thought one of the key things that we were right about was the Scotty fade, which looked very dangerous for a lot of Sunday, but he has one of the worst back nines of like his entire career, honestly, not just of the last few seasons. But I thought the key to being right about Scotty this week wasn't that we predicted that he wouldn't do well. It was that we kind of knew, like, what are the odds he does super well? What are the odds that he finishes only 20 or something like that? The key was that we predicted that he would be one of the highest owned players that we've like seen over the last few years. In my hot takes article, I called 70+%. He was 74% in single entries. So I think we got a lot of players right. And actually, like your point about Horschel, like I don't even necessarily say that's something we got wrong. We like Horschel because of how volatile he is. When we see the bad side, you can't really call it wrong. The things we can control, though, is how accurate we are with ownership, and then what decisions we make knowing where we are projecting guys ownership-wise. So the fact that we're continuing to see that we just have this like huge ownership advantage on the PGA DFS side, I think that's one of, if not our greatest strengths here in PGA DFS.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the 200 single that I was in, I think it was almost 76%, like unbelievable when I saw that you were calling like literally higher than 70%, I was like, man, like that's a different level of ownership, especially for the highest priced player.
Yeah, we're gonna talk ownership this week because I don't think it's going to be that different, but I'm seeing this like so one of the indicators that I used last week was all of the discussion about the without Scotty outright market, which to me is like kind of just ridiculous. Use Dietrich, for example. If you're playing Thomas Dietrich, you're hoping for the ceiling performance. If you get the ceiling performance, you're hoping that beats anybody else. I don't love the idea of going to a different market when I think last week we had Scotty at 23% win probability. We have him down to 17% this week. So again, that is not a market for me, but the fact that we see so many people still talking about it this week does make me think like, okay, maybe we will see another really, really big ownership number for him. We'll talk more about that. Anything else that you thought we got particularly right last week? I think your Minwoo call was a really good one there too.
Yeah, I mean, we were both in on him early. So I think we ended up going with Sungjae with our one and done, and obviously I think that his results are disappointing. Mm-hmm. But there was a point where, like middle of the round Saturday, that I was like, all right, he's gonna play his way into contention here. And he kind of just did some stuff that was wrong. I don't know if we would like. He's kind of in between. I don't know if we got him right or wrong. I think we I think you and I would agree. All we want is an opportunity. We want a guy with an opportunity that where we're like, all right, we have leverage in this opportunity. Now, if he gets it done at that point or not, that's golf. So,
yep, agreed there. I did want to share this in terms of what we got right. Sometimes it's difficult to kind of convey like the power of the GPP scores with a visual or something like that. I thought this was a really good one. Here we can see this was the $7,000 range from this past week. And let me, let's see. Okay, yeah, I can blow that up a little bit. Look at the negative GPP scores. Fitzpatrick, miscut. Harry Hall, the one positive GPP score, miscut. Then you have Fowler, withdrew. Billy Horschel, miscut. Stevens played decently well. Like he made the cut on the number and then was okay on the weekend. Eckroat, miscut. Novak, miscut. Glover, miscut. Hoagie, miscut. Homa, miscut. Hoffman, miscut. Then you see some of the like really good GPP scores. Davis Thompson was solid. Minwoo was great. McCarthy, okay. Power, okay. Taylor Moore, great. Like, man, these GPP scores, worth noting, like these negative guys, they were negative because they were the highest owned. These are the guys that everyone was playing in this range. All you had to do was not use those guys and use anyone else with positive numbers down here, and you likely had a really, really strong week. That's what the GPP scores do. They just make lineup building so simple, so straightforward, and they continue to come through week after week for us.
And so I have a friend that talks to me a lot about these GPP scores and how sometimes they can be so wrong and so right. And I think my biggest takeaway as a non-stats guy, as a non-stats is probably the wrong way to say it, but like I'm not into the numbers the way that you are into the numbers. Like if you've got 2 guys or 3 guys that you're like, I don't care what their GPP scores are, I think they're going to play really good. Awesome. Build around those. Mm-hmm. But when you're picking between 6 guys and you have to pick 2 all in the same price range, those GPP scores probably should lean on them because like you just showed, that's when they can be really beneficial. If you have a couple of guys that you are, hey, this is who I want to play, don't be talked out of that. Just know like you can leverage on the other 3 guys.
Yeah, that's a very good point, but I think it's also worth noting like you can be very confident about certain players in PGA, but you also have to take note of the fact that the guys you're most confident in and the guys you're least confident in a price range, their entire range of outcomes probably not that different from one another, which is a very different case than like NFL running backs, right? Like if you're looking at $5,000 running backs and one of them is 40% and all the others are less than 5%, chances are that 40% running back deserves that 40% and like his range of outcomes is significantly better than the rest. That's not the case with PGA. And I think one of the things that the GPP scores are telling us is that ownership in PGA DFS just isn't efficient in the sense that the guys who are the highest owned even if they deserve to be the highest owned, they don't deserve to be as high as they are. And therefore, we can still benefit from just finding the second best guy with a good GPP score and trusting that. It's not going to work every time, right? Because the GPP scores are not saying we're like a negative GPP score means this guy's going to do poorly, and a positive GPP score means this guy's going to do well. Instead, a positive GPP score means the chances that this guy does well, it's a lot higher than what his ownership reflects, and the same is true of the negative GPP scores. It just means this guy's more likely to fail and too unlikely to succeed to be worth this much ownership. So I think just kind of keeping that in perspective also.
Yeah, and you have to be okay with a volatile outcome. Like you can't be like, hey, I only got 2 of 4 or 2 of 6 through the cut this week.
Yep.
Like you have to be okay with the volatility, but when your 6 of 6 gets through, know that you've got a chance to ship the whole thing.
You know what I've noticed over the last year? I think that's an awesome point, Justin, is I'm not sure how many 6 for 6s I had off the top of my head last season, but I can remember years prior, oftentimes when I had 6 for 6, the 6 for 6 percentage was, let's say, 15%, 25% around the industry. And like having 6 for 6 wasn't that important. Over the last year and a half, since we really started using these GPP scores, whenever I get 6 for 6, it's coming when 5% of the field has 6 for 6, 8% of the field has 6 for 6. And every single time it's incredibly valuable to have 6 for 6. So that, like, to me, I didn't need any more convincing than that. Even if I didn't have the takedowns last year that I had, just the amount of times that I got 6 for 6 and the field didn't, like that told me, okay, I'm doing something very right here when my best weeks are the field's worst weeks.
And yeah, and I mean, it's not an if but a win, right? And you're also not like, am I going to win money this week? It's how much money am I going to win? Whereas sometimes you get 6 for 6 when everybody does, and you're like, man, my guys played shitty today. I hope I min cash, in the 200 single. Right? I mean, that's not very fun either.
There was an event last year where going into the Saturday, I wasn't even in cash, but I had 6 for 6 and the field had like 3% 6 for 6. And I was winning every tournament by the end of Saturday. Like I've never made that kind of a jump in one day. It coasted to an easy win that week. Hopefully we get more of that this season because that was a whole lot of fun. And speaking of, let's get into this week. Going back to Torrey Pines. So I do want to show the course fit model once again here for Torrey Pines, just in case some of you guys have forgotten. We get this massive weight on driving distance, 91% more predictive than most weeks' distance off the tee. Comes with about a third of a decrease on driving accuracy. Small boost for approach play, small boost for putting. Very big, very solid boost here for around the green play. First question to you, Justin. I remember just from our conversation a couple weeks ago that this kind of fits your intuition about the course as well. But we have reports that it's a wet golf course this week. We also have reports that the rough might be a little bit thicker and longer this week for the elevated field. How do you see the course fit model differing this week as a result of those condition changes?
I just hope they don't mow the rough. Like I think I was kind of mentioning to you, like this is our first big boy golf tournament of the year. Mm-hmm. The thing that is most intriguing to me is I hope it's wet as in playing long, but not wet to where the fairways don't roll out, because it's really hard to hit these fairways. Like, no matter how straight you hit the golf ball, it's just really hard. So that means distance just takes over. And then the videos that we've seen of the rough, like if they don't mow, you can't hit more than like maybe a 7 or 8 iron out of the rough, unless you get lucky.
Yeah, it's interesting because you definitely have that aspect where like everyone's going to be missing fairways. So you want the guys who are just going to be able to have success out of the rough. And so there you go to distance. But man, like there's also the potential that what if one of these guys with length off the tee, yes, I'm mostly thinking Rory McIlroy, has one of those weeks where he's also incredibly accurate. Like now you're talking just massive separation off the tee where he could run away with this thing. So I do think there's a chance that accuracy plays a larger role this week, but distance and around the green play, like those are guaranteed to spike once again.
The first person that came to my mind, it's funny that you talked to Rory, which I would say a guy that might be somewhat similar, but obviously not on the same level, is Tony Finau.
Yeah.
Like if he just has one of those spike weeks where he just happens to hit every fairway, he is going to be extremely good here.
I'm glad you mentioned him because I think he's going to be a pretty decent GPP score. We have him winning over 2% of the time. I'm not seeing value on him in the outright market, but I do think he's like somewhat of an interesting bet. But have you looked at his data at all recently? Because I don't know what happened from June on last season. His distance advantage pretty much gone, and he's not driving the ball accurately. I don't know what happened to him off the tee, but we have his distance estimate at 0.05 per round. For context, that's less than Cantlay. It's barely ahead of Tom Kim. It's less than Thomas Dietrich. It's like right with Rasmus Højgaard and Robert McIntyre, Keegan Bradley. Like this is somebody who used to be in the Oberg range of like gaining a quarter of a stroke per round with his distance. And he's also losing almost 2/10 with his accuracy per round. Do you have any idea what happened to his driver?
So I know that he definitely made an equipment change. So he's been, I know, like, man, where was it? He had a plethora of drivers laying on the bag that he was trying.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that he has become less aggressive off the tee, which I hope that he needs to go back to being volatile and hitting driver everywhere, in my opinion. But, I think if he hits the more drivers he hits, the better he is.
Yeah.
I just think that, like, if we get one of those spike weeks at a place that fits his eye, this is like, we always talk about being ahead of the game. That's kind of where I stand on him. Yeah,
that makes sense to me. I want to go through a couple other guys who just fit this like bombers plus short game mold. Obviously, Minwoo Lee, like maybe more than anybody else, we have him projected to be the longest in the field now, actually, even ahead of Rory, 0.44 strokes per round with distance alone. That's a massive number. And also has one of the best short games in the world now, just under a quarter of a stroke per round with his short game alone. Justin Thomas is highest at 0.26. He's at 0.19. Kind of gives you actually, I lied. Davis Thompson, highest at 0.27, actually eclipsing Justin Thomas there with his short game. Davis Thompson, by the way, hit some absolutely filthy bunker shots this week, and it was a shame he couldn't get his iron play working because it was special some of the time, which he needed to be because his iron play was so bad. But
he's he's got a chance to be really good.
Yes, he does. Yes,
he does. He's
he
young.
Can figure out the iron game at all. I mean, we're talking like wins all the time.
Yeah, like he's got a chance to be like somebody that we talk about in 5 years. It's like, hey, do you remember when like he was still young and figuring it out? Like
he's driving the ball exceptionally well too. So yeah, I mean that combination is really quite good. Benny On is another guy we kind of have to talk about here. One of the longest in the field. His short game, we talked about this last week. It was kind of bad at the end of last season as he was trying to figure out the putter. It was great in the first 3 events this year. On paper, it was bad this past week at the Phoenix Open, lost about a stroke per round with his short game. Anecdotally speaking, I noticed he had a lot of misses around the greens where he put himself just in like stone dead situation. So for example, the 12th hole, that par 3 on Saturday, it's a back pin. Everything races left to right towards that little pond. You can't miss in that back left bunker. If you do, you have no chance. Where do you miss? Back left bunker. So what did he have to do with the first shot? He had to leave it short in the bunker to make sure he didn't go through in the water, ends up getting up and down from there. But, that means that he basically lost like a stroke and a half with his iron play, but it shows up in the stats as losing half a stroke with the irons and a full stroke with the short game. I thought he did that sort of thing all week long where he just kept making either mental mistakes or just hit the wrong distance and just left himself no chance getting up and down. Also saw the exact same situation on 15, the par 5. I think 2 of the 4 days he missed in a bunker that you can't miss in. The other side, like you're good, it's an easy up and down, but the side he missed on, he just stone dead. So I think that there's a decent chance that I go back to him, especially if he has a positive GPP score. Now I can say, all right, he's already under owned, and I think that our own projection is actually underestimating him. That would make me want to go back to Benny at 77. What do you think of Benny?
So I know he was bitching a lot on Twitter about being allergic to making putts inside 15 feet or whatever, and was making comments. So The way that he worded his comments made me think that he felt like he was going to make more putts that just didn't go in. We are going to completely different surfaces. Like this, like I don't care what kind of grass type that they say they are. These surfaces and the way that they putt are completely different. Like we're not even talking about the same type of, like your ball doesn't even roll the same. Like it's just a fact of the matter.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if it was just the other thing about Ben On is he's also we know him as a guy that if he's not playing real good, he's not interested in grinding it out to finish 28th. Like he just doesn't. Like Si Woo's kind of the same way. Like they're not interested in grinding to finish 28th.
Agreed there. Next thing I want to point to is I don't have a ton that I love in the outright market so far because this is as top heavy as I can remember when it comes to win equity. We have Scotty at 17%. We have Rory at 8.3, JT at 5.7, Morikawa at 5.3, Hideki at 4.2. Pendrith is the first guy that I'm seeing some value on at 3.6%, but that takes up so much of the win equity, so much more than the top 5, 6, 7 guys usually take, that there's just not a whole lot of win equity left to find value everywhere else. So I don't know your thoughts here, but this might just have to be a week where I don't have any outrights. And then maybe there's a way to play it live where you just hope that one of these guys makes a bogey in the first 4 holes or something like that, and all of a sudden you get a good number. I don't really know what my plan is going to be, but I think I don't want to force anything, and I don't think anyone out there should force an outright bet just because you want some action when there's such a clear reason why we're not finding any, and that is Scotty, Rory, JT, Morikawa, Hideki, and maybe Pendrith are just they're just so likely to have one of those guys on top of the podium at the end of the week.
I'm glad you mentioned Pendrith. I knew that that would pique your interest just because we know how good his upside is. Yeah. And I agree that without looking at any numbers, I would have said he'd be the best value, which I think is probably pretty close to your numbers. The only guy that kind of piques my interest here is Zalatoris. I know he's played well here. If he truly is getting his speed back as he plays and as he's in competition, he would probably be my only one that I was like, because I think I saw him at mid 40s or mid 50s. It was a number that I was like, all right, if we're truly getting back to form, I could be interested. But I tend to agree. What's your thoughts on Davis Thompson?
Let's see. What is his number? I think we've got him at 1.5% to win. Davis Thompson is okay. He's 100 to 1.
Yeah. So
all right. I could definitely be talked into Davis Thompson. You just need an actual spike with the irons for once. 90 to 1 with an each way. I think I'd prefer that than the 100. Which, by the way, that's my only hesitation on Pendrith. Pendrith is available at 40 to 1. A 3.6% win probability. That is value. I wish it was available at the each way at that number, though. The best available with an each way is 33 to 1. So that's my hesitation there. I will probably end up with something on Pendrith. I just need to figure out if I want that 33 number or take one of the various 40s available. But I think it's a much easier decision on Davis Thompson. You just take the 90 with the each way instead of the 100 raw.
Yeah, and then the only other one that I thought was overpriced would be Wyndham Clark, just because we know he can win and he can win on grass type on these similar greens. He's not afraid of the wet conditions. He won at Pebble being super wet. So if it ends up being a wet week on a guy that can drive it really well, that can be a stone cold killer, Wyndham Clark is probably overpriced too. That's
by the way, Davis Thompson is 100 to 1 at Bet Rivers, not showing up in the prop shot at the moment. I'm not sure what's going on there, but 100 to 1 on Bet Rivers with the each way. So that's going to be my Davis Thompson bet. All right, let's move on to some DFS here. Talk some potential GPP winners. Kind of mentioned a handful already with those course fits. McIntyre, I think, is potentially going to be another great GPP score. He was kind of the GPP score hero this past week, and boy, did he come through a top 5 there. So kind of continuously, it's not just about the phase. The GPP score is also, once again, pointing us to these potential GPP winners. If I had to guess right now, I would say the best GPP scores are going to be, I think that we're going to get a very strong GPP score at the top from at least one of Scotty, Rory, and JT. My guess is that Scotty takes so much ownership that both Rory and JT look great. Do you have a lean at the top, like number one of who you would like to play, but also what you think the field is going to do?
Man, if I'm going to play somebody at the top right this second, it's got to be Rory. But I don't know. The ownership is so weird because you're not playing Scheffler and Rory, and if Scheffler is 70%, where does that put Rory?
Rory is my answer too, by the way. I think we're probably going to see 25, something like that from him, and I think we probably should see like 35 to 40 in terms of where he actually deserves to be. I think it's worth noting, by the way, that he has closed the gap in our strokes gain projections to Scotty relative to where he was a year ago. We have Scotty at 1.78 in this field, Rory at 1.17. Scotty was more like 0.9 to a full stroke ahead last year. And I think there's even a chance that we're actually underestimating Rory right now because we still have his approach projection pretty low compared to where it usually is. And that's because he wasn't the best with his irons throughout like the middle of last season, but we've only seen him once this year, and he was phenomenal with his irons at Pebble Beach. He was really good with his irons when he won the DP World Tour Championship in late November. That doesn't get factored in because it wasn't a shot link event. So I think we might be under projecting Rory, and we're already showing him closer to Scotty. So if the ownership kind of reflects that Scotty is in his own tier and Rory's not closing the gap, then I'm going to take the guy who's $1,400 less, scores like crazy, and is a wonderful course fit here, given his length.
And his irons don't even have to be that good for him to contend or win. Like, it's not like he has to be, he doesn't have to lead the field in strokes gained approach to win. He's just that good with his driver and everything else.
I think also, like, when Rory struggles, it's not usually with the long irons and the mid irons. It's usually some kind of wedge issue for him. But man, this golf course, it's going to bring long irons more into play and wedges a little bit less into play than most golf courses. So I think this is just a really kind of phenomenal fit for Rory. It's almost surprising to me that he hasn't played here more or played better when he has on rare occasion played here. So yeah, I think Rory's probably my guy at the top unless ownership agrees with us. I don't think it will, but rest of the field, like I'm guessing once again we'll see a good GPP score for Hideki, Pendrith, Minwoo Lee, Adam Scott. I think once again we'll pop Davis Thompson, probably another good one for Billy Horschel, maybe Nick Taylor. So we'll see, but it's going to be a lot of the same names, I think, because pricing is kind of similar, which is, I don't know about you, but if I have one complaint about the signature events from a DFS perspective only, it's that it feels a little bit repetitive. Like we're just kind of dealing with the exact same pricing week in and week out. And like, I might have 5 of the same 6 guys that I had last elevated event or something like that this week.
We could almost predict this. I think you and I could predict the pricing before it comes out.
Yeah. I'd like to see a little bit more variation there and some guys that are going to be a little bit tougher decisions. But
I can appreciate the Pendrith increase. I was surprised to see the Pendrith increase.
The counter argument to that, by the way, is because the field is so like, what have you done for me lately driven, we will continuously see ownership change from one week to the next. And I think you and I are kind of the opinion that like these guys are as good as they are. outside of course fit, like your feelings about a player shouldn't change that much from 1 week to the next, certainly not in a 2-week span. So if the entire field is like making these massive adjustments with their ownership, we have the exact same pricing, similar golf courses, there's a big edge to just playing the same guys and hoping they do a little bit better this time around and not overreacting to what you saw last time.
Yeah, for sure. I on my list here to talk about was Adam Scott, just going back there because just a couple of weeks ago how we felt about him, and then does he get overlooked this week because of maybe not having the success that we thought he would have before?
Yeah. I mean, our projections, we just think he's a better player than what he's shown. And by the way, like, it's not like he played poorly. He was 22nd at the Pebble Beach, gained over a stroke and a half per round. So solid showing for sure from him.
Yeah, no doubt. When, like you said, we just I think that you stick to kind of a plan here. I think that I hope we're not a week late on Rory, but I'm a big fan of Rory here. And then from there, what do we do? I don't know, but I think it's going to be a Balmer's paradise, but it should be hard, right? So I like you. Most of the time when we call say it's a Balmer's paradise, you're looking at 20 under. I don't think we have anybody sniff that.
For Underdog this week, we don't have any birdie or better or bogey or worse props just yet. But do you have any inclination of, like, do you think it's going to play significantly harder than a couple weeks ago? What are your thoughts there? Or maybe we just take that kind of angle on Underdog, whatever the numbers are posted at.
I mean, all accounts that I've seen point to it being way harder, not just a little bit harder. But that's been pretty misleading in the past. So I'll probably won't make that decision till tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And I also think, like, there exists the possibility that, scoring as a whole is a lot harder, but maybe greens are a little bit more receptive because it has rained, and therefore we don't see like a lower birdie or better rate. We just see a much higher bogey or worse rate. And so maybe there's an advantage in that regard. We haven't been getting as many bogey or worse props from Underdog this season, so hopefully that changes. But I do think we could end up seeing one of those cases where, like, the far and away the best strategy is you take over on birdies and you take over on bogeys. You boost your payout and you're not actually inverse correlating in any way. That's something we did with a lot of success last year, and maybe this is the first week to really kind of go back to that in a strong way.
Yeah, we'll see what they do. I was kind of disappointed last week in the different lines that were offered, and and then not just that, but they were kind of offered. They kind of came out late to where you didn't have much time to really do anything with them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely hoping the PGA product gets better in that regard. Hopefully it will once we get into some of these bigger events and now that NFL is behind us. But I also think it's worth checking out Pick 6 for PGA, because one of the advantages there is, like, you can correlate without guaranteeing that you're getting a much lower payout. So I might be making a personal pivot. I finished the NFL season over 100 units won on Underdog. So I would like to continue to just play on Underdog, but might have to make the PGA pivot over to Pick 6 to kind of it might just be a better game since it's fully peer-to-peer over there. So we'll kind of keep that in mind. If you want to give Pick 6 a try or Underdog a try, you can use promo code FTN to sign up for either one. Last thing here, Justin, let's talk some one and done. We're not off to the best start, but it is very early in the season. All it takes is one low-owned winner, and the only signature event so far of the one and done season was Rory McIlroy at 1%. So it's not like we're chasing a whole lot of people either. Any initial thoughts on where you want to go this week?
I mean, my initial thought was Rory, I think, but I'm not interested in a high-owned Rory. If everybody's trying to catch up and they go back there, I think that the ownership might drive me off.
I'm very curious to see where Rory comes in at one and done, because I think the most likely answer is that he's like 1% again. I think a lot of people want to save him for Quail Hollow or the US Open, something like that. But man, like, this is one of those events where his length really does mean that much. Ordinarily, I like saving him for when it's both distance and accuracy off the tee, like you see at Quail Hollow, but it's really, really hard to argue with him this week. As we talked about, I think the fit is so good for him. He's obviously playing well. So I think like as we get closer to Thursday, if we think he's going to be low owned, to me, that's an easy decision. If we think he's going to be popular this week, then we kind of bring in the rest of these guys.
Yeah, and I think if we want to go off the wall here, I think Pendrith is my answer.
Yep.
If we want to go to a guy that we're like, hey, 0.5% owned, like one of the few people in the field, I think that's where I would go, just because his upside is so good.
We are in lockstep here. He's my second favorite choice, so I am definitely good with either one. We've got them both available. To me, it's like let's just wait and see what our ownership expectations are for Rory. If he's too high, we go to Pendrith. If he's not too high, we just go Rory and call it a simple one and done week.
Yeah, I'm in for that. We had a couple of things that we didn't get to this week that we'll discuss over the next few weeks. The Monday qualifiers going away after Chandler's performance. I'm sure you have a thought on that. You've chased him like I have.
Yeah, to me, like that's a really good conversation for one of the weeks where you continuously see Monday qualifiers. It's definitely one that I want to talk about at length, which is why we haven't talked about it today. But the one we can talk about is the putting drama, because Lucas Glover came out with I think like just I loved it, kind of arguing that aim point should be banned. We may have touched on this a little bit last week, actually, but one of the conversations that I have continuously seen around this conversation is this idea that banning aim point as a whole would be really difficult, and I very much disagree. I think all you have to do is you have to ban standing and straddling your line. You have to ban like standing too close to the line to try and feel the slope with your feet. I think if you do that, aim point doesn't make sense anymore and just can't be used. Honestly, like even if it was still used, even if someone just went behind the hole and did this thing, if you're not walking the line and feeling with your feet in 8 different places in 8 feet, like it's not going to be slow anymore. So I'd be okay with it there.
So I have a fairly strong opinion. It kind of goes along the lines of we're still using chains to measure a first down, right? And we don't have any, like this goes in the same deal. The rule is you cannot stand in your own line. That is a rule. So guess what we have? We have technology. If you stand in your line, it's a 2-stroke penalty. So if you don't, whether you intend to or not, if you're standing that close to your line, we have the technology to see where you stand. If your ball rolls through there, you add 2 shots. Guess what's going to happen? People are going to quit doing it.
Yeah. I think it's a pretty easy one to enforce, and I think it would be really good. I think not everyone's going to agree with this, but like I personally view green reading as a skill, and I would like people to have to actually use that skill. I don't want to see people looking at a yardage book and seeing, okay, this slope is -2% left to right. I want people to have to see that with their eyes, and I want people to have to see with their eyes instead of using their feet to do it. So I'm on board there. Morikawa then talked about banning the long putters. What's your thought there?
We've already banned them. Don't anchor them.
Yeah.
But guess what? Guess who's in charge again? The PGA. If the PGA Tour is not going to enforce not anchoring them, then what are we doing? It's the same. It's literally all goes hand in hand. We have rules in place for all of it. Just enforce them.
Yeah, I think at a bare minimum, I would like to see them say anchoring is not just up against your body. It's along the forearm or even just touching the shirt. Because I think what a lot of guys do is like they actually put the putter lightly against their body and they say, no, it's not against my body. It's just against my shirt. Well, to me, like the only way we know for sure that you're not actually anchoring is if the putter is not touching your shirt. So that should be number one there. I'd like to see you can't anchor on the arm. I think you should have to hold the putter the way you hold the golf club. You hold it you hold the grip with your hands and you go from there. So that would be my preference for sure.
Yeah, everybody's going to look for a loophole. That's just kind of the way it works, right? That's what everybody's trying to do. And back to the aim point, like I have a really good friend of mine. He was a big aim point guy from when he was young.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the second to last group at the British Open with Brooks Koepka many years ago. Not many, like 5 or 6, but he was an aim point guy. I'd be like, oh, that's 2%. Like, and then he would come back and he'd be like 2% and doing his, and I was like, you can see it's 2% just looking at it. I don't got to go stand there to know the percentage. Like, if you want to use your fingers to figure out where you need to aim, but then I was like, but then you got to figure out what speed you're going to hit it, because that all matters. There's so many variables in all of it, like the length, the amount of time it takes to do it, enforce that. Like, there's so many things that you can just enforce. And the same thing goes with just don't anchor it. If there's any thoughts of your anchoring, you get 1 warning, then you get 2 shot penalty. Like,
yeah. I mean, honestly, like this is part of the larger conversation of pace of play, and I do think that if you improve pace of play on the greens, you're going to improve pace of play. Period. More so, like I know a lot of players talked about, like, hey, when it's this guy's turn, like he's just now starting to talk through with the shot with his caddy. He's just now measuring the wind or finding the distance and picking his club, and he could have started that process earlier. That's true, but like the gains you can make in pace of play, tee to green, I think pale in comparison to the gains that you can make in pace of play just by speeding guys up on the green itself.
And I'm definitely slower on the greens than I am anywhere else. Like, from tee to green, I play as fast as anybody. If I'm playing in a tournament, like, I tend to take more time on the greens naturally. Like, that's just, and I consider myself a faster than average player. So then you add a slower player and you add that in. And I mean, like, we love Keegan Bradley on this show. We talk about him all the time. He's painful to watch on the green.
Painful on the greens. You know what? He's not painful on 25 footers. He's painful on 4 footers. It's like, dude, just look at it. You can see it's left center. You don't need to stand in 6 different spots facing both directions to see that it's left center. Just stand and hit the putt. That, like, to me, that's when it's painful.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's almost like I hate the fact that we root for him, because you're watching this going, how do you root for this guy?
Yeah. All right, Justin, I got one more question for you. Any thoughts on whether either Brooks or Bryson might leave LIV once their contracts are up, which apparently is coming up?
I don't know enough about the inside of what the talks are between PGA and LIV to really know. Honestly, I don't think Bryson cares, because he's realized how much money he can make off YouTube.
Yeah.
So, like, Bryson's decisions are going to be different than Brooks. And then where is Brooks at as far as, like, the family and what he's doing and all of that? I think both of them would only leave if they believed they were going to gain more attention. It wasn't going to be about, it's not a money decision, right? Like,
They've already cashed in.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't need more.
Brooks is only deciding now of, like, what the problem's going to be is, do they look like a sellout if they come back now?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I think personally, like, if Brooks Koepka, for example, came back and said, you know what, I thought it was going to be the best decision for me, but honestly, like, I missed the level of competition on the PGA Tour, I'd respect that. I wouldn't consider him a sellout. I'd say, like, I still disagree with your initial decision, but kudos to you for now saying, like, you missed the competition. You want to come back and compete at the highest level. So that's the way I would view it. I don't know how most fans would, but I'll tell you, I do not know what either of these guys are going to do. The only guy that I'm confident in is, I think if Rahm was making that decision right now, if he had the ability to make the decision right now, I think he'd come back to the PGA Tour.
My argument to all of it is LIV has made the PGA Tour product better. Like, them doing what they've done has made the tour product better. So
I don't disagree with you, but
I mean,
I'm not sure that's relevant to the decisions they have to make now.
But my point is, like, Brooks or Bryson might be like, hey, we went to live because you guys were doing all these things. Now you've changed these things and made the product better. It makes me want to come back even more.
That's fair. I mean, my personal thought there is like, I don't think Brooks went to live because he wanted to be a part of the process of making the tour better so he could come back to a better tour. But I do get your point that like even if that's not the motivation, we can still appreciate the result of.
And I think like Bryson and Rahm, like two guys that had a chance to really make an impact on the game. I think they both believe or that the PGA Tour was not doing things correctly. And Bryson would be I think that what makes Bryson so much better than everybody else is he'll be transparent. He'll be like, this is why I left. This is why I'm coming back, or this is why I'm not coming back and I'm staying.
The credit that I definitely give Bryson is like almost every single guy who went to live cited the desired goal of growing the game. And Bryson is the only one who very clearly wants to grow the game, and not just wants to, but has genuinely done that in a way that like very few players ever have in the history of golf outside of Tiger, maybe Spieth, Rory, Hideki, and then some older guys. But like in this generation, I think those four plus Bryson are the five who've done the most to grow the game. And Bryson might be number 2 behind Tiger, quite honestly.
Yeah, no doubt. And even Spieth, like he had a great time to grow the game, and we're away. The product is better when Spieth is doing things like he did this weekend, right? In general, like that's and we really didn't even get to touch on Justin Thomas and what he did. But if Jordan Spieth was doing what Justin Thomas did and hold it on 18, I think it would have been the talk of the entire tournament. Whereas it was really cool Justin Thomas did it and everybody likes him, but he still doesn't have an impact like Spieth. So yes, you're right. Like DeChambeau is in the conversation of impacting the game with probably anyone in the generation.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. By the way, third straight week that our guy Jake Knapp played pretty well. So maybe he's poised to make a little bit of a comeback this season after just an absolutely awful summer and fall from him. Don't really know what happened to his game last season, but it would be really nice if we could see the flashes that he showed at the beginning of last year and then with his win in Mexico.
You literally were all over me. Yeah, he has no golf game. You can't play him. You only play him if you don't like money. Like
I mean, let's not get carried away. It's not like he went out there and won GPPs for you. We're talking 32nd, 33rd, and 44th so far this season. Miles better than the missed cut by 8 strokes at the end of last year, but he still has a ways to go.
He played some good rounds. Like he shot some low scores. Like he showed some, but I think he fits that volatile 9 under 5 over type of person, right? Like he's
great showdown play right now, by the way. Also, kind of a good point to bring up with Spieth is like not only did he finish 4th, but he did it in a very anti-Spieth way. He had some of the like classic Spieth pars, like the one on 11 where he takes the putter left-handed, stays in the desert, and then gets up and down from like 180 in the desert on the hardest hole on the golf course. But 4 really solid rounds. So it wasn't like he went 8 under, 2 under, 6 under, and 3 over or something like that. 4 very solid rounds and was great with bogey avoidance. So anti-Spiethian round, and yet it was vintage Jordan in some ways. Do you think we'll see more of the same from him this week?
I hope so. I don't know. Like it's hard to predict with him, and I don't know if I was huge on him last week or 2 weeks ago, and then last week I kind of didn't even mention him, and then let's I'm a wait and see Spieth guy. But I promise if he shows up on the leaderboard again this week, I will be whatever the Masters future is will be the ticket that I'll hold.
I think that my thought with Spieth is that the course fit is not good here, and I would kind of like for him to play mediocre or something so that we get some buy low opportunities in the next few weeks with him when he gets to some better course fits. I think one thing worth really noting on him so far, remember last year how well he was driving the ball, but not just how well he drove the ball, but how much longer he had gone, how much speed he had in his swing, whether it's the wrist or just for some random reason. The speed has not been there for him in his first 2 weeks. He has not driven the ball well. I think that that's going to hurt him a little bit at Torrey Pines. And I also wonder how the wrist holds up having to hit out of this really thick rough, especially if it's coming from distance. So I'm going to be off speed this week, but want to keep an eye on him for some potential buy low opportunities in the coming weeks.
Yeah, 1,000,000% agree. I think that, like I said, I'm pretty. I'd like to see him play very mediocre this week so that I can buy into the Augusta stuff.
Agreed. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. We will catch you